Keeping It Real with Tanya and Nettie. This is Series 2, The Realignment. Hello, Tanya.
Hello, Nettie. How are you?
Very good. Very good. I just got back from the beach walk, so I do look a bit blown and disheveled. But
I just got back from work and I barely slept last night, which was actually interesting. Is I woke up probably, I think it was about 12:45, and I was just tossing and turning, and I could actually feel spirit almost like working with my energy. And then I try to go back to sleep, and I would toss and I'd turn, I'd toss and I'd turn, and I would, sometimes when you connect with spirit, you get those weird like itches
yeah,
in different spots on your body. That's what was happening. And I was just like, ugh. Finally, I was like, look, whatever it is that you're doing, can you just get on with it? I gotta go to sleep. Like, because I get up at 4:45 in the morning for work
yeah.
and then go work 10 hours. So I'm exhausted. But yeah, Nettie and I were kind of chatting a little bit through the day, and we had a few epiphanies. So go for it, you share them because
Well,
they
we'll
make me
start.
angry.
Yeah. We'll start with the first message. So Tanya sent me a message saying, not quite sure if we're podcasting. So this isn't our normal day for recording. We normally record tomorrow, but due to work commitments, we were moving it today. And Tanya messaged to say, not sure if I can do it today because I didn't sleep well. And I felt like, I could feel the energy moving in my body. And I was like, okay, this is hilarious because the biggest thing that Spirit wanted me to talk about when we're talking about mind is sleep. And not only sleep, but how energy moves within our body while we're sleeping. So I was like, of course, Tanya is going to be our example as she has been throughout. And then it was kind of this moment where Spirit was explaining that is unfortunately for Tanya, her breakup and what's happening in her life coinciding with this download is not a coincidence. So all this information that I'm actually getting is so that Tanya can explain in a lived experience, a current lived experience, how to integrate this into your life and how it impacts it, and how basically most of what we say, most of what download, which is quite interesting because I've got the full download. so Tanya doesn't know what's coming up in her life. And I'm not going to prompt her because let's just go there.
That is not fair. And interesting, I was sitting down the other night, and I was looking at sort of some of the downloads and stuff that was coming for me, and I was like, oh my gosh, so many, even my past relationships, so many of my other experiences in life can actually speak to and give real life examples of the stuff that's been happening. So as Nettie and I were messaging back and forth, pardon my language, I'm like, this is bullshit. Is this seriously why my life has been so hard so that I can teach people? And then Nettie's getting all these lovely messages from Spirit, which you're welcome to share.
So I was doing the opposite. I was like, oh, how wonderful that you've got this amazing opportunity to share with everyone. And she's like, yeah, I get that. But for the minute, Spirit's an asshole. Choose someone else. And I jokingly said, something about a much nicer life. Like surely that he could have given you the ability to, win Powerball and travel the world, helping people and share that experience rather
Right.
than
Right.
a hard
But
breakup.
I think it very much speaks to, and what I was actually really prompted to talk about today was vulnerability. I don't know if that comes into the topics that you were prompted to talk about, but I think my shit ass lived experiences
Yeah.
speak, and me sort of sharing about them and how I've sort of moved through them, not only in a physical way, in a mental way, and in a spiritual way, is that vulnerability that Spirit was talking about so vastly in the last podcast, to not mask your feelings, just to be real and to, really get into the depths. And the reality is in my past relationships, I have not been vulnerable. And
Yeah.
I truly believe that is one thing that has hindered me in relationships. So in my last relationship, like, remember where I was like, but I did what I was supposed to do. I opened my heart and I got really vulnerable. Like, instead of being like, oh, I'm fine, I'd be like, this is scaring me, or I'm really uncomfortable, or this is the fear that's coming up for me, and actually talking about those things. And I think that people, like, here's an example. My relationship, now I was basically single for like 10 years because I was very, very busy. And I had a few little sort of relationships, but nothing serious before Kevin. But this one guy that I was dating, I used to get kidney infections for some reason. I'm sure there's some spiritual thing about it. I think it's to do with anger. No anger here, Nettie, none whatsoever.
No.
As I curse it, spirit. Oh my gosh, look at me turning red. I am sweating.
So are my palms, if that helps.
Yeah, holy smokes, the energy is very strong. So I go on this hike with this guy, and I wake up in the morning and I start to feel sick. Now, there is no way on God's green earth I was ever going to let a man see me be vulnerable or weak or not strong, like, no way. So we're going on this hike and I can kind of start to feel this fever coming. And I'm walking. We hiked 12K up a freaking mountain and back down. And I shut my mouth the entire time. I never said a word about anything. I get in the car and I'm starting to get that flank pain in my back. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like my back's hurting a little bit. Meanwhile, I'm like, get me home. I'm gonna die. But of course, I didn't say anything. And this was a very lovely man. Like, who is not going to support you when you're starting to have a fever on a mountain in the middle of nowhere, right? And I never said a word until I got home, and my roommate, as soon as I walked in the door, I'm like, oh, like, you got to take me to the hospital. I'm like, I'm not okay. So she takes me to the hospital. I get tested. They give me antibiotics. She's like, go home, have a bath. I'll go pick up the antibiotics and then I'll come back. So she comes back, and I was so sick at that point that she actually had to carry me out of the tub and like carry me to my bed to put me to bed. My fever was through the roof and I was sick as a dog. So I guess my point is, I had a very big lesson to learn on like actually getting down to that squishy place where you admit I'm hurting, or this scares me, or this hurts. And I can even think back to early in my career when I would deal with traumas where I would be like, oh yeah, I'm fine, and not actually deal with it. There has to be a point for me explaining all of this because I'm very much getting prompted to.
Yeah.
And I would be like, oh yeah, I'm fine. And it's through those experiences that I learned. Remember I said when I have anxiety, I make sure I talk about it. It's from those experiences that I learned how to be vulnerable, how to open up, how to talk about what's happening for me, how to have conversations to try to fix things, all of that. So anyway, I don't know why they prompted me. You tell me.
But that is important because what you come to, like at this moment where we're starting to talk about this, where, there's so much that came in this download, and some of it I can relate to, but a lot of it I can't. And to have gone from A to Z, which is what you've just done in there, you've gone to where you believed that strength was actually not saying anything, to now knowing that strength is actually saying something, and being vulnerable, right? They're both strength in another way, but you have the experience and the knowledge and understanding of what both sides are like and why one is better than the other and when one is good to use and when one isn't, because we need both, right? So I think that example that you just gave, Spirit was bringing up because that parallels a lot in your life. And when someone has had a massive change in relationships or anything that they're looking at, they are so much more knowledgeable to talk on the topic because they've been to both parties. They're not just saying, well, I think in there, like, I think I would be like that. You can actually talk from the heart in both experiences. So I actually am going to try something.
But what I was going to say, though, that I think is really interesting is all of these things have come very naturally to you.
Yeah. I don't know
Like,
why. So
yeah,
I read
like,
this realignment stuff, and it's very interesting because a lot of what they say to do, I am doing. But I do look at my upbringing, and I think I was brought in here aligned for a reason, because my dad was very aligned, and so is my mom, actually. And so I was brought up to show that you don't have to have a rough upbringing, and we're not just here to have negative, we're here to have love too. And yes, I've had negatives through my life, absolutely, but because I was well aligned, they never felt like negatives in the way. Like, there was always love. And part of what they talk about in the thing is actually that, like, when you are aligned, in their words, joy, love, and happiness actually always stay with you. And you can be absolutely sad, absolutely miserable, absolutely all shit like you are, but you can still feel okay in yourself, and you can still see those bits but when you're not, you feel sad and miserable with whatever happens, and you can't see an answer, you can't see a light, you can't see anything but negativity, because your soul is the one that carries that love and joy. That's pure. It does, it's all the other things are human kind of physical parts to it. But where Spirit wanted me to talk to today was what I have now nicknamed, not Spirit, but I nicknamed the triangles, because he keeps giving me these, they show me these things in 3 triangles. And we spoke about it last week, which was diet, mind, and body. So I wanted to show the diagram because they talk about the path to realignment. And today we're going to we spoke last week about Spirit wanting to talk about mind. And I just want to show this diagram. I'm going to try and do this because I'm not very, I had a quick practice, but I may not be able to share this screen in the right way, but hopefully I can. And they talked about the 3 things, air, water, sun. And then they talked about the fundamental element that is crucial to mind and body and to diet, and also to air, water, and sun to manifest, which is sleep. And they talked a lot about what sleep does and what happens to our mind and our body when we sleep. And I found this absolutely fascinating, because I kind of knew sleep was important, but I never put it as the 4th part of air, water, and sun. You know, we all know, we talk about plants, but I'm going to try and pull it up so that those watching can see, and I'll describe what we're looking at. Here goes. Share. So this is the path to realignment, and you'll see there's a blue triangle with diet on the top, mind on the bottom, and body. And they made me make sure that it was an equilateral triangle, because all 3 of them have identical, equal importance. And then across that, they have a triangle going sort of the other day. It looks almost like a star in orange. And they were telling me the colors to use, which is quite unusual when I was doing this. And it's air, water, and sun. And they said, like a plant, air, water, and sun are the essential ingredients to help them grow. Okay, we all know that. They provide the energy that requires for existence. Okay, that's common knowledge. When awake, we actively seek these. Like, we obviously need air to breathe, but a lot of people will look for water, will drink water, will have water in part of our day. And just as much we look for sun. And when you go into winter and you start to hibernate always, and then the sun comes out, that feeling of almost that longing for it. And when most people think of a holiday, they think of sun, right? Sun, water, fresh air. It's kind of the way they were saying it. And our bodies need a balance of these 3 energies to fuel us. But the 4th element, the 4th energy that is just as important, is sleep. So in the middle of that triangle, it stems up, and they've got it actually, the way I saw it was like a 3-dimensional triangle. And at the top of that triangle was sleep. And they said that the sources are fundamental. Just as importantly as the 3 others, sleep needs to be part of our day. Sleep is in fact a much more than our physical body just resting. Alongside this, it's crucial to wake up from a state where we've been lying still, that we do two things. We realign and we refuel. So we refuel, and we refuel and re-knowledge, or what they called sleep knowledge. I don't know how else to say that. So I'm going to stop sharing that and go back to us. So what they said was, the refueling that we do at night when we sleep is a process where the energy gained from the sun, from the air, from the water is stored during the day, and as well as our diet. And that all gets converted into fuel, so that we actually get tired at the end of the day. We lay still, and somehow by laying still, we get energy. And so they're trying to explain the importance of that. The energy from the source is required to make this happen. And then they talked about source, and I've seen source before with spirit. In fact, the first time Tanya and I met online, they showed us source, that we were both connected to the exact same source. And they talked about source, and I don't have a diagram of it as pretty as that, but they talked about the center, and out of that is the source. So they've got air, water, sun, earth, and then there's a fifth one, which I can't see. It looks like darkness to me, and there's no word to it because it's blacked out to the point that I can't read the writing in it. I'm told I'll understand more about that at a later stage, and that I'm not ready to understand, and it's not ready to come out of the process. So I'm very intrigued to know what darkness is, but it's the fifth source. So when we sleep, this energy that comes down into our body helps convert the sun from the day, the air that we're breathing, and the water, and actually starts to refuel that in the body. But at the same time, we actually go through sleep knowledge, and this comes from souls. So when you said you felt like there was this energy, there is two types of energy coming into your body. One of them is that actually refueling of the energy. It's strengthening your bones and your muscles again. It showed me with eyesight getting better. So you go to sleep with tired eyes, you wake up with your eyes, bright and streamy and that sort of stuff. So that's part of it. But the one they wanted to really make us understand is that the information that we receive when we lie down, when we go to sleep, is necessary for everyone to connect to their own spirit, to their own higher self. So although when we're awake, we all talk about trying to connect to our higher self, what they explained is every single person connects every single time they sleep. There is a pattern that they showed me, and if you don't get into the right pattern, you won't actually get to this part where you're getting different types of knowledge, but you will still get it. And that's why when people start to fall asleep, they'll start to almost think better, and they'll start to get and think, because that's when spirit starts connect to you. But in your deepest of sleeps, you actually have full conversations with your higher self. Everyone, whether you believe in spirit while you're awake, you might like, I don't believe in that shit, I never see spirit, I never do anything. You actually are when you are asleep, everybody. And our bodies have been designed this way because speaking to spirit and working with spirit on our path is crucial. That's the point of being here. And so we actually have even if you're not aware of it, you need to know that it's happening. And what they didn't want us to get was too involved in, okay, how that is. But they talked about, I'm going to read my notes a little bit here, but they said dreams are a byproduct of sleep knowledge. Teachings, scenarios, fulfillment of desires are all obtained during this period. It helps to balance out our thoughts and desires, our fears and excitement. So without this ability, we would go into the next day. So say we didn't sleep for 5 or 6 days, our fears would get worse, our desires would get worse. So say we go to sleep, things that our body, the way it's designed now, actually is sort of genetically able to desire, or where you live or what you do or your age group. When you go to sleep, soul has no gender, no age, no anything. Those desires actually can be fulfilled by your to almost scratch and itch. So it was interesting that you mentioned you were kind of itching when you sleep. And I know that feeling where it's like all this information. They actually used the word scratch and itch. They were sort of like all those little itches in life that you, things that you won't necessarily do in this lifetime, you can actually do while you're sleeping. So some people will remember their dreams, those sort of playful things that they actually do, and some people won't. But everyone is actually going through those. But also that's kind of the fun, sort of side to it in a way, or a negative side to it. So it can be your fears and things that play out over and over again in your sleep. And young children in particular, they will remember them more than when they're getting older because of their intuitive balance is more into their head rather than their physical body. And as they move out of it, they'll have less sort of memory of dreams, and we sort of go through teenage years forgetting our dreams. So they said, if sleep balance and the length are not achieved regularly, then you'll actually increase your anxiety. You'll increase your fear of being misplaced in society. They talked about. So you kind of don't feel right in your own body, and it is because you're not having the communication. You're not aligned with your higher self. You're not having those sort of behind closed doors discussions that your conscious brain has any idea of. So it was fascinating to me that, because I'm a vivid dreamer, and I go back to places in my dreams all the time. And in fact, I go back to this house. I bought a house 3 years ago in a dream, and I went back there recently and actually started the renovations. And I'm sure I'll see it renovated again in 3 years. But obviously it's not a house that exists, or is it? Who knows? But to see those sort of scenarios come out in your life, it's like, am I living this so that I can work things out, so that if I do see that house in the future, it's easier for me? Am I scratching an itch of an old style home that I wanted? Am I, what is happening in there? I'm not quite sure, but at least I know that it's there is so much that we live through every single night that is so much faster, so much larger, so much thing than what we can. And we need sleep, is what they said, just as much as we need air, just as much as we need water, and just as much as we need sunlight. That was kind of the start of the importance of what happens to your mind almost, and to your body while you sleep. So I suppose when you mentioned about sleep, I'm like, she has no idea that I've just written about a whole thing on sleep, and that's the first thing Spirit wants me to talk about today. So yeah.
Isn't that interesting? It's fascinating because it always works like this, always. And I was actually considering, I'm on a course tomorrow and I'm going to be home late, but I was like, that's it. I'm doing it tonight because Nettie's got some tea. I want to hear the tea. So here's a few interesting things. What you actually pulled up on that diagram was David's star. That's what it's called.
Okay.
With the two triangles. Now I got a reading and they said that Spirit, I have a very big life purpose. My life purpose is to bridge the gap between logic and spirituality. And also that Spirit wanted to start working with me with geometric shapes, and they would start with David's star.
Oh, wow. And I had never heard this before. That is so cool.
This is fascinating because so many things, it's like all these puzzle pieces that didn't fit together that just in the last couple of days are all of a sudden coming together. And it's like, oh, I get it. I understand, why this has all happened. But interesting too, when I was sitting down and I was sort of doing a bit of a download, and I don't do it so much as a download like you do, where you're all of a sudden filled with all of this information. More how it works for me, or how I want it to work, is that I sit down with my notes app, usually in my phone, and they just kind of channel it to me. And I almost do like mediumship and I type it out, because honestly, to get all of that at once, I think I would find super overwhelming.
It is. Yeah.
It would
And
be overwhelming.
And my standard style would be to do exactly as you said, to ask. If I'm doing it with a client, like I ask a question, the information comes, it's it still takes a bit out of your body, but it's nice. It's not like dump the shit on you. Yeah.
But kind of the impression that I have is that this has been slowly fed to me over many, many years. So one thing that they were actually talking about, and I was a little bit hesitant to talk about it simply because they were talking specifically the male and female gender. It wasn't male and female or masculine and feminine. It was literally female and male gender. And because and I believe that it kind of related back to what you said about Western women having gone so far out of alignment. And what they were talking about is that women, Western women, basically the men have to rise because the women, and they said that it started in the 50s with the feminist movement, and women have in that, like, because even in their physical world, they're mixing in the masculine and the feminine, they're going to work, they're doing all of those things. So they're kind of mixing the masculine and the feminine energies at the same time. But they're saying that we're like incredibly overworked.
Yeah.
Because we're tending the home, we're tending the relationship, we're tending our jobs, and there's a significant, and I don't want to piss people off, but this is truly what they were telling me, that there's a significant amount of men that are not stepping up to the plate, that they are getting so comfortable with women doing everything that they're lacking the need to step into a new energy. So my point is that what they talked about is that what's happening for women is that their cortisol levels are going out of whack, and it's making their hormones go out. So what happens, and I know this from readings and from my own experience, of course, thank you, Spirit, is that when you become exhausted, because I'm a police officer, right? I've been a police officer for 23 years. We go through situations all the time, lots of stress where our cortisol levels shoot up and we get a lot of adrenaline through our bodies. And then eventually your adrenal glands stop functioning properly and they start either over, I want to say squirting out cortisol, or they don't enough. So a big thing that happens when the adrenals actually go out is it affects the women's hormones. So their progesterone gets low, and they become estrogen dominant. This stuff has been taught to me by Spirit. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional. This is just how they've explained it to me. So what can also happen is that your cortisol levels can get twisted, where cortisol shoots at night and not during the day. So you'll be up through the night, unable to sleep, and then during the day you're going to be completely exhausted.
Yeah. And then you're not being intuitive because you're not getting in line with yourself. Yeah. And you're not able to do what you're meant to do.
And they also spoke about I believe they said the next 10 years there's going to be a significant number of these imbalanced relationships splitting up because women are fed up and we're exhausted.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting because I was like, yeah, that's sort of what just happened in my life. Like, am I making this up? And they were like, no, this is what's happening. This is literally what's happening to women. And that is why, on a physical level, why Western women are out of sync.
Yeah. And also
out of alignment.
In saying that, when I did the writing for the age group of your, the very first download was that graph of age groups and your intuitive and physical body. One of the things they talked about for men in particular, but across the whole board, is our focus is on the wrong thing as holistically. And so part of the diet, mind and body is to actually get a path back to realignment. But with that, we talked about the importance of purpose. And in past podcasts, and even with what you're doing with the shit that's happening for you, it almost gives that another purpose that you wouldn't already have. But what they were explaining in that area was that men have lost focus of what they are fundamentally meant to do. And what happens with that is it causes a realignment issue, but it also causes like a depression, because when you're not connected, when you don't see that kind of love and joy and happiness as a standard, you start to actually go, I don't know where the goalpost is. And you start looking for a goalpost. And actually where we're meant to be when we're truly aligned is that the goalpost is irrelevant. You're not actually trying to figure out how do I get out of this hole, really? Because most people who look for a goalpost are trying to move out from where they are, but you become in the moment a lot more and you stop thinking about where I'm going. Doesn't mean you're still not strategic in your life, but that is just a side step, not an actual step. And I think a lot of men, from the understanding of what Spirit was saying, they don't know where they're going. And they're looking to know where they're going. So what is my role? What am I meant to do? Am I meant to sit and watch TV at night every night? I don't think so. But that's what I'm doing. And I'm losing my energy. I'm not sleeping well. I'm not doing all those things. And I'm not finding the purpose or where I'm meant to go. So just as much as women are way out and we've got a big alignment, men have to take responsibility that they are way out too.
Women are way out because they're overextending themselves. Men are way out because they're not even extending.
Because women are overextending too, they don't have to. Well, with modernism, they started to look for convenience. And they were time poor because, we started to think we needed all this stuff too. So we start working harder for stuff and then we get time poor. Then women are still doing their stuff that they're originally doing, but now they're working full time. They're doing all this stuff as well. So we become so time poor. We start eating frozen foods. We stop making veggie gardens. We stopped doing all the things that we were meant to do in the way we ate in the background. Even, families that had veggie gardens, but we don't need them anymore because we can just go to the supermarket and get everything we need. We can get everything from all over the world whenever we want it. So, there's a whole shift that is just out there, that time becomes crucial for us. And we actually are focusing our time on the wrong thing. And when we start to get realigned, one of the wonderful things that you get is you will get time to do these things because you'll realize a lot of the other things that you're doing, you don't need. They're not.
But not just that. Sort of what they show me is that when the woman gets more aligned and the man gets more aligned, that's when you actually get that true partnership
balance. Yeah.
Where it's 50-50 and you actually have that balance. So more time is freed up on the woman and more time is actually freed up on the man, simply because they're not sitting in their heads worrying about their purpose and what they should be doing and whether they're providing. But they're also saying that there's been a change in what being providers means.
Yeah, absolutely.
Into it being about financially providing in order to provide convenience as opposed to an emotional providing. So when you're shut down, when you don't have purpose, you're not connecting to yourself, you're not connecting to your emotions, you're not connecting to your partner, and you're not in alignment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think because where they also started to go with what I was writing down was into mental health. And so they did speak very much to that cortisol levels in women's hormones, because that moves into depression, that moves into anxiety. Messed up hormones is huge for depression and anxiety. Same with your cortisol levels being out within your body leads to significant depression, significant.
Yeah.
So sort of that mental health and then they spoke about it is very rare. And they kind of said outside of something that's like schizophrenia, that where mental health is actually rooted in the chemicals in your brain. Often mental health is actually rooted in your physical or your mental or your spiritual, but not so much in the way that the chemicals in your brain aren't functioning properly on its own. It's a result of your hormones being out of your cortisol levels, your diet, inflammation from foods, or I feel like you have something to say in relation to this.
Well, interestingly, the triangle that we talked about, the first base is diet, mind, and body, and that interlink between the three of them. And so exactly what you're talking about, they actually run around in a triangle every way, and diet affects mind, diet affects body, body affects mind, body affects diet, that type of thing. And so you're exactly right. Like the two things that are going to affect in Spirit's opinion, the two things that affect your mind the most are body and diet. So physical and what you eat.
Yeah, and I think it's
smoke
important
or drink or
yeah, I think it's important to say that the solution for all of our problems is not just to eat healthy.
no.
Because I know people that, will be, oh, I just got to clean up my diet, and they'll try to eat really well and eat clean, but then they're still filling their heads with, negative thoughts, and they're not sleeping properly, and they're not doing all of those things. Like, it's a triad. You
Yeah.
have to have all of those things in alignment. I can't just eat fruit and vegetables every day and not deal with the fact that my hormones and cortisol are out.
That's right. And that air, water, and sun actually sit over the top of that, and then sleep sits in the center of that. So,
right.
They all are so integrated that the balance of it all working is actually all of them working. The more you've got out, the further away you're going to be. But the road to it is actually balancing all the three, and then balancing the three on top of that, and then sleep is without it, even though you've got them all, your body actually can't process it. You can't talk to Spirit and say, what path am I on? All these sort of things. Like, I'm dying. I'd love to be able to put a microphone in and figure out what conversations I'm having during the night. Like, I know there's a lot of shit because I can remember some of it. Sometimes I remember, a 2-day weekend away, and that was only like a 10-minute dream or whatever. So there's a lot of shit going there. It'd be really interesting to come. But going back to the download document on the actual mind. So they talked about sleep and the importance, and Spirit wanted to make sure that was there. But they also wanted to point out, and this is going to sound almost like too simple, but they really wanted me to explain it in the way that they said it. So they gave me the thing that we understand, because we can see and we can experience physically that we are all kind of born the same. We've got hands and legs and arms and head, but that we all contain sort of different formulas. So some of us will have longer legs, which makes us faster runners. Some of us will have brilliant eyesight. We can sit on a computer all day. Some will have different shaped bodies that make them capable of doing different things. They talked about exceptional hearing, musicians to actually be able to hear the music, all those sort of things. And they just said that the variations are enormous, and they wanted to point out that our minds are identical to this. So if you can think of our mind as being like a physical thing, like our body, fundamentally we're born with the same formula of a mind, every single person. But the strengths, the focus, the engagement with our minds are what makes us different. And they pointed out that they said it's in fundamental importance for human existence, just as it is animal and plants, to actually, like a biosphere, they said, we've got to work together with everyone's mind to actually make the world exist. This is why they didn't give us different things. This is why we have a male, and this is why we have a female physically. And mentally, we have a male and a female type brain, and we have everything in between. So, or stronger. So they did say, and they're reminding me then, that we have exactly the same mind, whether we're male or female, but we have strengths that are within that separate. So they use the example of a cake, and they said this is a very basic example of ingredients in a cake. If everybody was flour, we would have no cake. If everyone was butter, we would have no cake. And they said that once you get all the ingredients together, within yourself. So if you just look at yourself, so you get diet, mind, body, air, water, sleep, sun, all working perfectly, you get a perfect cake, right? But they said, and by the way, they haven't used the word perfect. And every time I write the word perfect, they make me go and take it out. So apparently that's not used. So whenever I say perfect, please just erase it and think of something else. But if the ingredients come together, they're also saying that there's flourless cakes. So they didn't want someone to think that there is anything more dominant than the other. They said there's vegan cakes, there's layered cakes. They went over fruit, you know, all these fruit cakes, the list goes on. They then mentioned that communities are all of parallel importance, pointing out that all the ingredients need to be present to make this up. So they're really pushing us to know that your mind needs to work with other minds. And so when we're talking about mind, one of the things that they want to make sure that you think that you look after your body, looks after your mind. You look after your food intake, your diet, and they look after your mind. You look after your sleep, you look after your mind. You get sun, you get water, you get air, your mind grows. So they're sort of stemming back to knowing that all of those things. But they also want to know you to know that your mind is unique. You are an ingredient in thing, but you also need to be paired up with other minds to actually make it work correctly. So yeah, that was like a page of about 10 that they wanted to make sure that everyone understood a very simple way of becoming. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. That means you've got to do it.
I'll cut in because they spoke to me specifically about the brain, like the actual hunk of mush that's inside of our head, not just our mind. I think to me, mind and brain are two different things. Like mind is, you know, sort of what we think, and brain is the actual mush inside of our head. And they talked about scientists not being clear about the full function of the brain. And you know what? I actually need to pull this up because it was like I was reading it going, what am I even reading here? Oh, back to the relationship piece, because they did bring it through about just men and women. I'm just looking at my notes. They said this dynamic has played a significant role in the development of non-gender. Although spirit does not have gender, humans very much do. And many years have been spent on the dichotomy of the masculine and the feminine, and the intuitive and the physical, which in turn will change the way in which these stereotypes and traditions will be moved to more balance. So what they're saying is that this non-gender will actually bring these stereotypical, because that's what's happening, is what they're trying to say is that this female and male stereotype is obsolete and we're still playing it out.
Yeah.
So this non-gender and this refusal to sort of go into those traditional ways, which there's nothing wrong with traditional ways if that's what works for you. But this non-gender is to kind of break that down as well, that it helps to break that down. I'm just trying to get to the brain part. They said they're caught between new age and traditional for women, and women are having to do too much.
And that stereotypical came with modernism as well. You know, we started to see the advertisement of women in their little aprons with the, you know, food on the thing, smelling it as you walked in the door. Like, we started to market women into a very feminine, you know, stereotypical thing, which women aren't just food and baby, you know, and that's what we started to do. And
men aren't just work and financially support.
Yeah, and when you look at where we started to do that on the graph that talks about where how society steered from the path and where the realignment, that's one of our biggest dips, is actually in that era where we started to really gender role, and marketing and television and things started to come into play, where we could visually see all these stereotypicals brainwashed into us. We became more focused on a holistic societal norm that was not true.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I read something somewhere that that's actually based on, the 40-hour work week. Like the men worked, the women stayed home. And they also spoke about that being a very easy way for everybody to figure out what their role was and what they were supposed to do. But with modernism and money and convenience, these things are no longer required. So people are actually have nothing but choices at their fingertips. So they can do things differently. And I believe a lot of people are doing things differently. And I think that's wonderful. Anyway, so they spoke about specifically the brain. They said, something about level 1. I don't know. Humans have not come to understand it is so much more than matter. The brain creates frequencies that are felt through the body and in other people's bodies. This is beyond what emotions, brain chemicals, or synapses that are understood at this time can comprehend. The brain is akin to a multiverse. It created and demands all sorts of the body, the mind, and the energetic body. Have you ever wondered why the seventh Claire is placed directly above it? It is a hub and train station of sorts, communicating with all aspects of life. Scientists don't yet understand that vast capabilities of the brain and its power. Energetic frequencies begin in the development of the brain. Emotions and negative thinking can cloud energetic frequency, which, as we know, is where mental health starts. There are very few people that actually have chemicals, and I kind of touched on this, that actually have chemicals in their brain not working properly, as in essence, these chemicals are in fact the traveling of energetic frequencies. These traveling energy frequencies flow throughout the entirety of the body and make up the matter as well as the energetic body. When this energy, the soul's energy, is extinguished, that is what you call death. So the soul lives in the brain when emotions are not processed and a person is looking out the window and not in the mirror. And then they made a little side quip. They said, I like this one. Their synapses stop firing properly and dis-ease is created. Humans have a multitude of vices in which they use in order to numb the realities of life on earth. This I understand. I have had many lifetimes. This is spirit talking. I have had many lifetimes, and of these lifetimes, I always had some, other times plenty more. And this was where it just started to get really interesting. My lives spent intergalactically have shown me that there is a different way in which to process life and its many, many traumas. Many are able to enjoy the fruits of the delectable and remain strong and clear. Many others suffer greatly, and it is of great concern. I feel like this is speaking of addiction. A number of the sufferers are the ones that have been placed on earth to create change. These ones are brought with such a high level of sensitivity that they are in essence too sensitive for this world. It is not these souls that need to change, and their purpose is clear. It's the rest of humankind. Then it went into sort of discussing who this spirit was that was speaking to me and what their last lifetime was. But what this, and I don't want to get into it yet, I'm not quite sure why yet, but I don't want to put it on the podcast. But what this spirit actually talked about was, he said, I saw a different way with food and knowledge as a prism in which many thrived.
Say that again.
Food and knowledge as a prism, 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 like a prism, I don't even, and I was like, I don't know, let's ponder that for a while. But so that's what it talked about in relation to the actual brain, that the brain matter is actually what shoots out the energetic frequencies. I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I personally have always kind of seen it as being like a spirit energy.
Yeah. But I mean, the physical and the spirit energy are combined. I mean, that's what they're trying to make sure we understand. They are one, like they work together. You are spirit, you are body. In
conjunction with the mind. And that's interesting because they keep speaking in threes. Have you noticed? Oh my God, that was another thing that they said in the reading. When it said David Starr, it said, we're going to start teaching you things in threes.
Oh, well, this whole thing is in threes. Like this whole
Yeah.
download comes in threes.
So it's mind, body, spirit, the elements, the
Air,
air,
water,
sun,
and sun.
and
Yeah.
then
And then
the
they triangle back up, saying sun and water up to sleep, water and air up to sleep. Like it's a
so it's like a
triangle
pyramid.
rather than yeah. That, like, I just put it there and they're like, no, it's a 3D, like it's literally a 3D thing with each 3 points hitting each one.
So it's a
Um,
pyramid.
yeah, it's pyramid. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, fascinating.
Interesting.
So just so you know, Nettie, we're at about 50 minutes, just giving you a time check, but go for it. I want to keep hearing what you're saying.
Yeah, this runs exactly in line with what you said. This is where they went from there when I lost my throat. And I think they were trying to let you put that part in because they explain that your mind and body is exchanging information continuously when you're awake. Okay, so they talked about being asleep, and then they were just saying the same thing is happening when you're awake, not only with other people, but with all living organisms. So we're coexisting as souls on soul levels. And they talked about the importance of our brain and holding our physical and our intuitive minds in one, and that all the source comes back into that point, which is along the lines of what you're saying there, as far as I understand. They said we're coexisting as on soul levels with our intuitive mind and our physical mind at the same time. They pointed out that this is just an awareness. There's no need to understand it too much more. But they used the example of walking through the forest or walking along a beach. And they said you walk through a forest and it clears your mind. You find a calmness within, or like you find the answers to what you're sort of thinking. And they're explaining why that happens, because your brain is energetically taking in and exchanging information as you walk with the trees, with the grass, with the air, with the sun, all that sort of stuff. So the importance of this information, they said, is to make you aware that you need to make time to actually go and, get away from the distractions and slow down so that you can actually get that, your brain doing what it should do. You get that intuitive and that physical energy exchange happening. And then when you go to sleep at night, you've actually gone with knowledge that you've picked up on a physical level. And if you're not doing that, you're not actually bringing that physical level back to your soul, back to have those discussions to move forward with. They then said that this is actually very common with people. And even though you don't know that, they talked about the word telepathic, they said telepathy is happening constantly with your mind, or with your intuitive mind and someone else's intuitive mind. So when you're physically near each other, there is a whole different world that's happening at the same time. Your brains are actually, your intuitive minds are actually conversing as well. So you will know more than you actually think. And it will take time when you sleep for that to absorb back in your body. Sometimes it can absorb straight into your mind, so you know it, and you kind of go, oh, I already know this. So some people will be able to feel like they're telepathic while they're in that moment, because they go, I know what you're thinking. That's everybody is doing that all the time. They said everybody is exchanging that energy constantly. There's just so much energy being passed around. But some of us will be aware of it when we're awake and while it's happening, and some of us won't. So we will have soul guides around every person that are talking to us and giving us information that that our brain is actually absorbing, but we don't know. Like when we sleep, we have these huge, it gives us a chance to have those huge discussions. But you and I are actually able to tune into it and hear it while we're awake. So they were sort of giving that analogy to say that you and I can do it, and we've been given the gift of being able to do it while it's awake. And some people, as they get more aligned, will also be able to do that when they're awake and when they're not. And they're just saying to me now, it's important to point out to people, just because you're aligned doesn't mean you won't have trauma. And that Tanya is a very good example of that. Someone who is very aligned, true, but also will go through all these short, because that's your life's purpose. And we now know that your life's purpose is not only to go through the trauma, but go through the trauma so that you could discuss it out there in the
Nobody
world.
can see my eyes right now. I'm rolling them.
So you have been selected. Come on now.
Hooray! The only, yeah, I'll be honest. Kind of
Sorry, we shouldn't have ended on that.
someday I'm going to be like, oh my God, what a blessing. But that day's not today. What I wanted to say interestingly, do you remember when we were talking about Kevin and how he would shut down?
Yeah.
There would be times that I would be like, I don't understand what's happening. And I'm a very intuitive person. Like I can pick up on what's happening with other people, and because I'm probably having that intuitive mind sort of conversation. But the reason that I'm bringing it up is because it used to stump me. I was like, I need to have a conversation. Like, I need to know what's going on. I don't understand what's happening, because with his misalignment, remember when you were talking about like him having 10% and me having like 40%? I was even prevented from being able to intuitively pick things up.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, okay, well, this is sort of the state that's happening right now because da da da. But I would struggle with it because there was just no opening, is the best way that I can explain it.
Yeah, and you do have the ability to actually shut that down, that energy down. So that exchange that we're talking about that is flowing all the time, you can actually bring up enough energy to block that energy. You can put your armors up. We talked about armors last week, and you can put an armor up, and the more passion and the more I want to say the word energy, but it's kind of describing the energy. The more fuel you have for that energy, and it's usually with someone that you really love, you can actually block that energy. So you can build up enough armor to say, no way, I'm not going to do that. Like we put up armor on ourselves because we love ourselves. We do that, and we don't want to hurt ourselves. We want ourselves. So we bring up armor and we leave it there for years and years and years and breaking down that armor. So they can do that with you too. So even that 10% that your partner may have had available, they can block that. So you come in, you're like, why am I getting nothing? Like,
why is nothing? Like, we need to talk about this. Like, I am so confused. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I watched a friend a two intuitive couple, and I didn't know why they were just not connecting. I couldn't quite work it out. And I was in their house, and I hadn't been over their house for ages, and I was sitting talking to her, and he walked in, and I was like, oh my God, I can't see his seventh chakra. I can't see any energy. And usually I can see energy above there. And I looked across at her, and she had energy, like she had light all around her, and it was gone. She just shut it down. And both of them were 100% in their physical, and they both shut down their seventh. Very strong, intuitive people, very energy based, but you could just see that they were that capability that we're cleverer than what we think, and we can actually shut those things down even if we don't physically mean to. And so it's actually burning through those armors and taking that energy and actually doing it. Like, we've actually done a little bit of la talk today in energy and things like that, but I'm hoping that we're actually making it as palatable as we can to everyday life, because it is difficult to explain.
I think that's probably why I was prompted right at the beginning to talk about vulnerability. Because if you think about me shutting myself down, not admitting that I was in pain and having a fever, going on this walk, I'm not connected to my intuitive because I'm shut down.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if I'm vulnerable and I'm speaking from my heart, I'm opening up my intuitive because I'm allowing someone into my energy and into my heart space. So I believe this sort of wraps all of it up, because the actual like physical implementation of this is through vulnerability and not masking your emotions. And that is how you remain open and have that energetic exchange as you're walking through life.
Yeah. And know that it's happening. Know that it's happening. Yeah. It's just happening anyway. Yeah.
I have personally experienced somebody who is not being vulnerable, who is shut down, and that like energetics just aren't flowing, you know?
Yeah.
So I believe that's why they wanted me to open with it, is just to sort of wrap it up that way, because that's the real world way to keep that energy flowing. You shut it down, you don't be vulnerable, the energy doesn't flow.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Wow.
Wow.
That was the
We went
mind.
full circle. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening. If you have any questions, please send them in. We are happy to answer. And
I'm going to
it's
put that
obvious.
triangle up on the Facebook page. So have a look at
Perfect.
that for those who are
Perfect.
listening and didn't see it. Yeah.
Okay. And thank you, Nettie, for being here and for your downloaded information. Thank you, Tanya, for your hard life circumstances and being an example for others.
Yeah. And next week, we're going to be talking on body, Spirit is telling us. So that's the third part of the triangle.
I did touch on that a little bit today, but
You did.
I'll sit down and see what they have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Lovely.
much. We'll see you next time.
See you later, everyone. Bye.